3 days of events and seminars, we have been trying to discuss from different perspectives how to address the problem of pollution and littering in the sea. We have been talking with astronauts, we have been talking with sailors. Today, we are going to talk with people that are working within companies to try to see not only what are the technological solutions that can support us in tackling this important environmental problem, but also what are the organizational solution, organizational point of views. And I'm very proud today to introduce you with the three great speakers that are going to introduce us into this discussion. So, by the way, my name is Valentina De Marchi, and I'm based at the University of Padova. And today I'm going to be the chair of this session. Please let me introduce our first guest, that is Andrea Illy, the chairman of Illy Café, and also the co-founder of the Regenerative Society Foundation, a very recently funded foundation that we're going to discover more during the webinar today. Welcome, Andrea Illy.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody.
The second host that we're going to interact with today is Alicia Fortuna. Alicia is a very young and very passionate and competent sustainability communication manager. She has devoted her competency in communication really to support startups that are working fully into a regenerative and sustainable approach. Alizea, Rod, and Sheep included. And she's going to explain us a little bit more about this experience later on today. So welcome to Alicia as well.
Hello, everyone.
And last but not least, it's a pleasure to welcome Professor Marco Frey, that is a colleague working at the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, who is also president of Global Compact Network Italy. And that is going to provide us, therefore, with an overview, not just based on his own expertise as university professor that since many years has been working on circularity and sustainability within the organization, but also providing us with the perspective of the Global Compact Network. Welcome, Professor Frey.
Welcome. Good evening, everybody.
So that's now the turn to give a little bit of rule of the game. So I'm giving the floor to my colleague, Professor Guido Bortoluzzi, to introduce us about how this afternoon is going to work.
Good evening, Valentina, and good evening to all our guests. Good evening from the fantastic Trieste that you can see here from the background. I'm not here, of course, but just wanted to remind to all the people that are listening to us that you can use the chat. Actually, you have to do that. You have to do that if you want to interact with our guests. So if you have questions for our guests, please open the chat. You can find it below the face of Valentina, and we are here. And actually, I'm using it for first to say good evening to everyone in the chat. So looking for your questions whenever you want.
So, and with this great start, let's start with some questions to our guests as well. And I would first like to interact with Andrea Illy to try to understand from his own experience, why is circularity, why is the focus on a regenerative society even more important nowadays? In the last years, these words, sustainability and circularity, has become more and more important. But I would say that this is even more so today, and this is getting a more urgent issue even for companies. Why do you say that those topics are very important today and we should address them with all our forces?
Well, I fear, thank you for your question, Valentina. And let's say my best answer is that I fear that everybody's aware now that we are in a systemic crisis. We were in a climate crisis, as stated by the European Parliament already in 2019. We are now we enter in a sanitary crisis in spring. As a consequence of that, we are in a financial crisis. We used to be before, unluckily, in a political crisis. And this kind of a spillover effects is touching whichever element of our society. But what is most important is that the triggers are the same. And because everybody can understand that the dramatic impact of any anthropogenic activity during this era, which has been named Anthropocene, which started with the Industrial Revolution around mid of the 19th century. During this era, which is really so small, okay, because if you make the Earth life, which is over 4 billion years, to one day, then our Anthropocene is just 2 nanoseconds of a day. So it's really such a short term, like maybe a nuclear explosion, something like that. But during this period of time, we created so much imbalances in the ecosystems because everything went exponential due to a very accessible resources in terms of energy, particularly energy. Humans have been able to boost an exponential growth. And whichever time you have an exponential growth, you have a problem because resources can only grow linearly. And so this widening gap between our extraction from the ecosystems in a linear way, we keep extracting with no concern about renewing and regenerating what we extract, eventually created these huge unbalances, which you can unfortunately understand with the climate crisis, climate change, sanitary crisis, migration, intolerance, and so on and so forth. And so now that everybody's aware, everybody's seeking for a kind of reboosting our world, our society, our economy with a new model. And that new model is what we hope will be regenerative. So transitioning from an extracting linear model, past and present, into a new model, regenerative and circular. Regeneration are basically biological processes. So they concern whichever is organic, from microorganisms to large ecosystems like populations, for sure cities, lands. And there are two types of this regenerative process. One is are the physiological ones, which allows the biosystems to stay in good health. These are the typical detox, let's say, physiological processes, but you also can restore life where it has been depleted, which is good for regeneration, for renewing the resources. Whichever is not organic, and we consume, I would say an educated guess is that we consume maybe 60% organic resources and 40% mineral. But one day we might have much more organic than mineral. For whichever mineral resources which cannot be regenerated, the model is circularity. So try to, the 4R eventually are reduce, reuse, recycle, and regenerate as long as possible. And this will be, and finally, to conclude my answer is, this is triggering one of the most amazing economic and social boom since at least 1 century. Because with one move, which is regenerative economy or sustainable economy, we will need to do so many investments that this will fix also the economy. And whichever time the economy is performing well, you also improve the society, wealth distribution, and happiness in general. So I'm very optimistic. I think things are happening already now, but of course we will need a couple of more decades in order to uh, be able to benefit of the impacts of this transformation.
And let's start from here, because so you are telling us that those crises that we are experiencing are increasing awareness and are spurring new growth that has a very important potential, not just from the environmental point of view, but also from the economic one, which is a really great news. But as you said, we may need still more time to go in that direction. This is because also this transition can be particularly challenging, especially for companies that have started as a traditional company, not really caring about being regenerative or being circular. So based on your experience even within Illy Cafe, what would you say are the keywords that should guide firms that want to effectively change their activities to go in this direction of becoming more regenerative and more circular? What should drive their activities to make sure they are really revisiting in a correct way their activities?
Well, I think that the only hurdle is exit barriers, because if you look around, there is enough technology available already now and enough scientific knowledge, which is the source of any technological process. So there is enough of that technology available now for transitioning the society, not 100%, but at least to really start the process. The hurdle, the obstacle to be overcome are exit barriers, because just imagine one of the most impactful, let's say, industry, which is the energy one. How many trillions investment have then been in fossil fuels? Of course, oil companies are not in a comfortable position now because they are not happy to be renewable yet. But as anybody in the market is punishing whichever industry which is not sustainable, the financial community is punishing them with ESGs, with ratings, with preferred investments, and so on. Regulators are punishing them with more and let's say more and more difficult to overcome or to, let's say, to comply with regulations. Consumers are punishing them. So it's just a question. So nobody would be crazy to continue to invest in this, let's say, old industry. This is why once these trillions of investment would have been depreciated, then nobody will be, I repeat, crazy to continue investing in those industries, and they will invest in the new ones. Everything renewable. So we will need this couple of, how much is a typical payback period of a large investment? Maybe 10 years, 15 years. Okay, that means if we suppose that the process starts now, we will need 10, 15 years now to transition from place A to place B once the depreciation has been, let's say, finished. Otherwise, they will go out of the market because as Tesla proves, Tesla is a good example. It produces a fraction of any car manufactured in the world, but its capitalization is the biggest in the industry. Why that? Because the market clearly, let's say, accounts the promise made by this industry to transform the automotive industry into a sustainable one. And this is happening in each and every sector.
It was a very interesting point that you raised, Andrea, that you were saying technology is out there. We have the scientific knowledge to really support the transition. even though we're not necessarily there yet. Not all the companies are already moved, and you explain great examples. And Ili, for example, is also one additional one about companies that had already made and is already working on a transition. But also your point was somehow suggesting at the important to be able to communicate what is really what companies are doing regarding sustainability to make consumers and policymakers being able to punish wrongdoing or to evaluate well-doing. So I would love to engage Alicia Fortuna in this discussion, because Alicia, you have been working a lot as communication for sustainability focused companies. So based on your experiences, what do you think are the attitudes and the actions that should be put in place by organizations to make sure that they are able to communicate effectively, and therefore to be able to show what they're doing and to engage consumers, so to make this transition working even further?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much, Valentina. I think that first of all, when you are communicating sustainability, it is important to acknowledge that you are having a very, very big responsibility. I think it's important to ask ourselves, what's the ultimate purpose of someone that, like me, works in communication? Especially in a time in which our disconnection from reality, from the real world, has become in some way the cause of major environmental and social distress. There's a lot of brands positioning themselves as leading change today. And I am a firm supporter that brands really have the power to change things and to, in some way, guide the sustainability revolution. I mean, I see it every day with the companies I work with Rod, with Perpetua, with Sheep Included. But I think what's also very important to note is that the actions through which brands and their communication can fulfill their promise for sustainable development relies quite heavily on their capability to engage, to guide, to empower people, consumers, with the tools needed to amplify a more responsible lifestyle. I truly believe that brands today must be useful. You know, they must be of service to people, and they must be honest, especially today where there's somewhat confusion around the term sustainability, a confusion that was raised because of misleading marketing and communication practices in the past, but that are still happening today. Unfortunately, we still see a lot of greenwashing in the sustainability space. I work a lot with fashion, and unfortunately, we see quite often that sustainability is treated as any other market trend, you know. So as in a fashion house, in a fashion brand, once, I don't know, 10 years ago, you would sit in a marketing meeting and people would be thinking about strategies on, I don't know, how to sell baggy pants because they were cool that season. Unfortunately, we see some of these same mechanics and strategies today with sustainability. And it's an approach that is absolutely flawed for obvious reasons. You cannot think that you can solve the issues of today by falling into those same patterns, that same behavior that led to the problem in the first place. So the motivation can't be to acquire a new market share, but it must be motivated by a real sense of urgency, because as Mr. Illy said at the beginning, it is an urgent matter. So as communicators, we have the responsibility to give people valuable information that live beyond the short-term transactional nature of standard communication. And how do we do this? I guess there is no golden rule, as with everything, but there is an article that I read a couple of days ago that in some way kind of beautifully sums up my thoughts on this, or a part of my thoughts on this. It was an article in which Magnusson, who is poet and writer from Iceland, and I probably mentioned his name incorrectly, so apologies if there's anyone from Iceland listening to us. But what he said was, he asked a question. He said, why are grandparents essential? And then he answered it and he said, they are essential and they're important because they offer an unscientific units of measurement, an unscientific, as an alternative to logarithmic scales, so to numerical scales. And he said that using numerical scales is a bit like telling a story without the use of adjectives. And then he made an analogy that I found really interesting. He said that since the colonization of Iceland, not even 12 times his grandmother's age has passed. So he created this beautiful image where he said the history of Iceland can be narrated, but with the story of 12 women in their 90s that stretch their arms and hold each other by the hand as if they were in an aquagym exercise. and you know, if someone told me that Iceland was colonized at the end of the year 800, I would never remember that. You know, it like goes in one ear and out the other, contributing the fact that I don't have a scientific brain. But the idea, the message was that people don't understand the numbers, but they understand and they remember stories. And I think sustainability communication often falls in this this thing that can be considered a bit of a trap of talking big numbers, big percentages and big scientific research. And we absolutely need that. It's essential, it's the base of everything. But I think we also need more grandmas in a swimming pool. You know, just to close it off and to answer your question. Today, sustainability and social and environmental sustainability are not checklists. You know, it's not like sustainable material done, better communication done. It's so much more than that. A thing we often say with both Rod and Perpetua is that sustainability is not a thing to do, but it's a thing to be. You know, you cannot do sustainability. That doesn't mean anything. So I guess to effectively communicate sustainability, you first have to practice it effectively and develop and bring to the market products that answer to the true needs of humanity and people. And that is definitely the first step before even thinking about communicating sustainability.
Thanks, Alicia. I think we are really creating more and more broader picture here. So we are saying that the crisis we are facing pushes us to be more regenerative, but also that in this way, I mean, interesting changes has to be done at a corporate level, but also that changes that engage, that guide, that empower. It was very interesting, Alicia, what you mentioned about the importance for companies to reach out more, even in educating consumers, because actually being sustainable, building a sustainable society does require everyone to contribute. And with this, I would love to go back to Andrea Illy and ask for his experience, because I found very interesting what you have been funding, like the Regenerative Society Foundation. And the whole concept behind that is somehow that that firms alone are not enough. The founders, many of them are part of the corporate world, but actually what you are trying to achieve is to a better society as a whole. And also coming from the experience of Alicia, it seems that indeed the resources, the energies that are needed to make such a transition cannot lie within one company. So my question will be, what are the other elements? What are the ingredients that should not be missing in the recipe of a sustainable and regenerative society? What resources should the organization and companies be able to activate even outside their borders to make sure that such a transition is actually taking place?
Well, thank you, Valentina. So the Regenerative Society Foundation has been incorporated for organizing governance for the Regeneration 2030 program that was launched in Parma a few weeks ago at the occasion of Parma Italian cultural capital. So Regeneration 2030 is centered around three pledges, which one is regenerative economy, the second is climate action, and the third is world happiness. But there is a consequential approach because if any activity needs to be self-financed, so regenerative economy is a kind of an enabler for any action through regeneration. And world happiness is a kind of a prerequisite because from very well established studies since the ancient Greek philosopher to current, let's say, psychologists and neurophysiologists, there is a very strong correlation between the level of responsibility and engagement of people with their well-being. So well-being is a kind of a prerequisite for any regenerative process at the same time as it is the kind of the promised land, because after you improve the ecosystems and the environment through economical activities, we can definitely live in a better world. So with that, so this kind of consequential approach is regenerative economy for climate impact and world happiness. It's about basically changing business models for any economical activity from extractive, as I described before, into regenerative. Of course, the Regeneration Society cannot do cannot aim at reaching the goal by itself. So it's all about the great coalition that we will be able to create and the momentum that we will be able to create. So as far as the coalition is concerned, we started with a coalition made by the United Nations Sustainable Development Network, led by Jeffrey Sachs, who is also co-chair together with me of the Regenerative Society Foundation. We have been fortunate to have the Bhutan Center of Happiness joining the coalition, the Pontifical Academy of Science joining the coalition, as well as the B Corp world, the best of the Italian sustainability expert led by Enrico Giovannini and ASVIS are, of course, part of the coalition. We got the FAO and UNIDO. We got OECD, who's committed to support us with measurables, so KPIs. And we also have a good, let's say, strong relationship with the World Economic Forum. So this is a good enough coalition to start. It will be broader because our idea is to try to stimulate regeneration with a substantial award. It's too soon to announce that award, but I can say that we will have an annual summit, annual regeneration summit, regional, one in Europe, one in Asia Pacific, one in Middle East and Africa, and one in the Americas. So this will give us time to do at least 2 of those summits before 2030. And by the time, I hope that we will have been able to at least create some awareness and have let's say started the process, the transition.
So we are also giving some anticipation in here. So if there is anyone out there that may be willing to participate to the prize that is going to be organized within the Regeneration Summit, so you get a news here that you may be willing to consider. So that's great to see how much energies are out there actually that are contributing to this new regenerative society type of approach. We tend to be a little bit pessimistic sometimes, but if we look out there, there are really many companies, organizations, associations that are pushing towards sustainability, which makes us look a little bit optimistic, like Andrea said initially regarding our ability to really reach this goal. And I see there are already some questions coming. And again, please feel free to start asking questions because soon we're going to go to the Q&A session. But before going there, I would like to engage again Alicia. And this is because other than being an expert in communication, you're also part of that generation that we are hoping is going to drive the change because it's much more aware and is much more caring about sustainability. So I'm asking you this question in your double role about communication manager, but also about a young and engaged woman that really believe in sustainability and is important and of reaching a more regenerative society. So based on your experience and your feeling also from a generational perspective, what do you think are the steps that consumers could do to support this type of approach? So within this framework of many actors and energies that are moving to support a more, a society for an higher well-being, what do you think are the needed steps for consumers and society at large to move to support this transition?
Again, thank you, and thank you for the responsibility. I agree that definitely my generation is very awake and it's very fierce in some way in this regards. What personally made me become, first of all, an activist and then start working in this space is education. I mean, learning what was really happening. And that was the thing that kind of like sparked my flame and made me say, I have to be part of this fight to change things. So to answer your question, education, I think it's absolutely in the first place. So the consumers, in some way, a responsibility to inform themselves on what sits behind the products they buy, but also the responsibility from the brands to engage in education. I think today there's a very strong information asymmetry on the true cost of the products we buy every day, on their impact. And this asymmetry is a big contributor to the current crisis that we're living. You know, the resources that we take from the biosphere to make products are not valued, are not calculated in the final tag. So for example, with Rod and with Perpetua, we are very often inside schools. Rod has a pro bono educational format that we bring to 10,000 students each year in Italy. And when we go in the schools and we talk to high school students about these things, about these issues, about what sits behind a regular t-shirt, you can literally see their eyes that just like go in flames when they understand that through the choices they do every day and through the readings they do, they truly have the power to catalyze a positive change in this sense, and that their actions matter. As consumer, personally, myself as consumer, but also as inhabitant of this planet, I am thirsty for truth. You know, today, if a brand wants to talk with me, it has to become a relevant guide in a certain sense on issues that transcend the products through, you know, informative, honest, participatory communication. There's so much information out there, and what I feel we're missing is someone to guide us through all this information to understand what are better choices that we can make. Another thing that I think is essential for society at large is innovation. It's happening, but there's still so much to do. Again, as Mr. Illy was saying at the beginning, the final objective is that of moving from a linear to a circular business model. The definition of sustainability is satisfying today's needs without compromising the opportunity for future generations to satisfy theirs. And if we look at things in this perspective, it kind of becomes clear that we won't buy consumer products anymore, but we will increasingly buy service products. So, products that offer answers to real problems, so that are made to last, that have lower or regenerative environmental impacts. So it's a responsibility both of companies, of course, but also of consumers to ask questions, to ask like, who made this t-shirt? How was it made? Where was it made? How much water was used? What's its CO2 impact? And if consumers start asking this question and demanding answers, very soon business as usual will follow. And the third and last thing that I think is essential is that of activating synergic and symbiotic partnerships. And I'll give you a practical example for this. So as I said, I work with Rod and with Perpetua. Perpetua is the company behind it is called Alicia, and they have been working in the world of circular economy for 25 years. They've been working with all kinds of materials, transforming them into new objects. Exactly. One of the products that they invented 5 years ago now, maybe a bit more, is Perpetua. It's a pencil entirely made of recycled graphite that we recover from landfills in Turin. It's the waste from the production of graphite electrodes that are molds. And all this powder simply goes buried underground in landfill. Perpetua and Alicia, they recover it, and they created this pencil that consumes this material, very precious material that was considered waste, through the act of writing every day. And then we have Rod, that is a very, very young brand in the fashion space. And what happened here was that when Susanna Martucci of Perpetua and Alicia met Matteo, who is the founder of Rod, she asked him a very simple question, but that changed a lot of things for both companies. She asked him, Matteo, I have tons and tons of graphite powder that I'm trying to get out of Italian landfills. By making pencils, 15 grams of graphite recovered per pencil, I will never get there. Is there a way that you can find an application for this incredibly precious material in the textile industry? Matteo, Rod was newly born back then. Susanna opened the door of her company to the Rod team. So she literally offered us like all her years of experience, all her connection, all the people she knew to help us in this mission. And we took Susanna's question, what do I do with graphite in the textile industry? We did our research, and we discovered that 2,000 years ago, the Romans used to dye fabrics using graphite. And that in a small town in southern Italy called Monterosso Calabro, there was a graphite mine at the time. So we went to Monterosso Calabro, and we discovered that the women of the town still had kept alive this tradition verbally through generations and generations. And they taught this technique to us. And we reinvented it in circular economy dynamics using the same graphite that Susanna recovers to make Perpetua.
And this is a great example, Alicia, of how much to be circular, that's important to create connections. And also this connects with your idea of growing and educating and engaging different type of actors, and also connects with some of the questions that we are collecting from the crowd. And I would like to give the floor again to Andrea Illy to tackle one question that is coming, that is asking, what is the role of companies with respect or jointly with policymakers and create new and convincing scenarios through collective sense making. And then there are other questions that are asking, for example, about business models and what you think there should also be business model and which governance are fit for sustainability. I see many questions coming. I will leave the floor to Andrea Ili to try to address them in line with what we have been discussing.
Well, as far as the role of corporation is concerned, we shall keep in mind that 2/3 of the world economy is made by the private sector. No matter if you talk about the GDP, if you talk about employment, if you talk about innovation. So in terms of critical mass, corporations, if they work together and towards and they lead in the same direction, they are in the capacity to change the world. So it's like Voltaire said, if you want to change the world, in Candide, right? If you want to change the world, start cultivating your garden. Okay. So corporation can start by triggering the change, by transitioning their resources they use into renewable. They can also, in our case, for instance, we have the fortune to be processing an agricultural product, and being agriculture so relevant in terms of sustainability and regeneration, particularly in the south of the world, we can do a lot in transforming the way coffee is grown and making this industry more sustainability. But this is only an example. If there are other companies not being involved in a sector which is directly in contact with the ecosystems, let's say, then they can for sure give back to the society by improving the urban and industrial ecosystems in which they live, and so on and so forth. So there is no limit to what industry can do. And as far as the governance is concerned, we have to take into account that this is an hyper-complex dimension. I would even say it's probably, besides complex, is chaotic. And so the mathematics of this kind of complex and chaotic systems is non-linear. And because it's not linear, it's not predictable. You can explain it. You can maybe modelize the behavior of those systems, but you cannot predict. And this is one of the big deficits in our society, because we are all used, for the sake of simplicity, to linearize or to try to linearize any phenomenon. But our reality, the world we live every day, is for sure not linear. So why do I say that? Because governance altogether are in a crisis now in managing very complex systems. We can clearly see that the global order, with the United Nations and different intergovernmental entities, together with local governments or national governments, are struggling to cope with this kind of complexity. The good news is that this complex system, particularly the chaotic one, they kind of self-organize themselves. Each time you have a big attractor. So an attractor is something which is creating a transition phase from point A to B. And this could go into catastrophe or to a better place. So we are now kind of living on a kind of a verge of a of a future change, which will be the consequence of COVID, either catastrophic one, I hope not, but it is not impossible that we have a sequence of correlated events like it didn't happen in the first half of the 20th century, starting with the World War first, and then the crisis, and then the pandemic, and then everything which came together in the Second World War, etc., etc. I hope it will not happen. If we are fast enough in triggering this new regenerative and sustainable society, then we might trigger a very beneficial, let's say, change early enough to avoid any other dramatic events. Governance can do a lot by creating incentives. The only governance which resembles a little bit to a possible global order is the European Union, because the European Union is not even a federation. It tries to put together 26 different states which pretend to maintain sovereignty, and still, even though in the past until 2019 the European Union was not in the capacity to really change the system, with the exception of the monetary union, but this is another story. Now it appears that this bold Green Deal and now the Future Generation Fund centered around the Green Deal will be as a huge incentive in the capacity to create such an attractor which will be triggering change. So I hope I was not too complex in my explanation, but basically this is what I think is can happen.
And actually,
it's good to know that because Europe committed to be carbon free by 2050, now Japan and then Korea, with a kind of a snowball effect, all major countries, with the exception of United States, but we will see soon in few days what will happen with the United States, are changing their perspective into a more sustainable one.
What a meeting. I think there were so many great insights. We talked about responsibility of different actors, about the importance of timing, about incentives that should be created, and about different actions that should be put in place. Marco Frey, that was a very dense day. Would you like to share with us some thoughts to somehow put in line what are the needed steps towards circularity, and what are the key good insights that we can learn based on the great experiences that were shared today? We can't hear you yet.
Yes. Thank you very much, especially for the passion that you put on the table. I think that we need to afford together, as according to Early, the three dimensions of the present crisis. So the economic one, the social one, and the environmental one. And to do this, we need new economic and business models. We need a vision of the future. I think that in the governance perspective, we have the Agenda 2030. The Agenda 2030 is a vision of the future in which we can put together all the three dimensions, because there is circularity, there is all kind of transitions that we have to do to go in the direction of sustainability and circularity. There is the energy transition. Tesla is a good example because put together energy transition and mobility transition, breaking the sector division. And then we have agricultural transition. We have decarbonization. And in the Green Deal, all these kind of challenges are included. So Europe, the snowball effect that Andrea Illy defined, is very important at the moment. And it's the same in the corporate sector. In the Global Compact, 50% of companies committed more than 10,000 came from Europe, because there is the capacity to understand in the long-term perspective how it's important to change business models. And if you want to analyze the engagement, the commitment of different companies in the 70s goals, it's quite interesting to see that the less important in the present engagement are the environmental ones, especially the 14 regarding the life in the sea. So in connection with your first 2 days, we have to do more for enlarge the commitment of companies in some very important topics. But we have to work together. Another point that you underline is that it's necessary partnership between companies, but also among companies and institutions, and engagement of consumers. We need the prosumer to go in the direction of sustainable consumption and production, circularity, because the customer is the king. And when we, as a citizen, but at the same time as a consumers, we want to be a part in this big, big challenge, we can play an important role. I think that this is the most important incentive for a change. And according with you, we have to define better the ways in which companies can be regenerative by design, changing the products, and at the same time, restorative by intention, because the environment is very, very important for our equilibrium. We discovered this in this period. We understand another way more than in the past, how the environmental equilibrium is connected with the social ones, and also the effect on the economy. So use this passion to work together for the future we want.
Thank you, Marco, for these really great words. There are many questions coming out, but we don't have the time to address them. But I think we all walk out of this meeting with a lot of really great insights and a new passion and energies to really address sustainability and circularity, and try to pursue our more restorative and regenerative society in our own role. I think we did Innovamare project. We are willing to make our role in trying to create more technological and scientific knowledge and better ecosystems. But I guess every one of us today is stepping out of this workshop asking ourselves, what could be my role? How can I engage? What responsibility could I have in this direction? So again, thanks to all the speakers today, to Andrea Illy, Alicia Fortuna, and Marco Frey to provide us with really great insights. And thanks for all the colleagues within the Innovamare projects and the University of Padova team that has supported us for this workshop. So I think it's time to wrap up. And again, thank you, everyone. And just let me remind that if you want to see again, you will have the possibility to see the video of this meeting online later on.
So, and goodbye also on my side, Valentina, from the Innovamare project. It has been an honor to have these fantastic guests tonight. And as Marco was saying, to be more prosumers, Professor Marco Frey, well, dear Andrea Illy, while we were online, I bought also the special tool for cutting the capsule of Illy, and I have the proof that I was buying them while we were online. So let's be more prosumers, and let's contribute all of us to save not only the seas but also this world. Thank you, and bye bye also on my side.